As the Misery DMCA descends further and further into identity politics, I thought we could go back and understand it a little bit better to know why it's unfolding the way it is, what happened in the server, and just everything, really. Because it's my firm belief to always be as informed as you can whenever possible, especially in times like these, whenever information is so very crucial. Let it be known that some of this info cannot be, well, corroborated. It is somewhat anecdotal, but it is the most we have to go on so far, and I fear for a while from now. We need to understand absolutely everything about this situation. The fact is, Maywing worked on multiple games. He's also insulted users in his server simply asking for help, not to mention some, aged posts, if you will. Nevertheless, Maywing has posted an apology for some of the things he said in 2022 to 2024 being only 16 to 17. We'll go through that later. But right now, let's take a look at the DMCA. This is apparently the full entire DMCA. So we'll be going through I'll give you the highlights of it, so to speak. I'm not going to read the entire thing. You don't want to hear all that legalese, and I sure don't either. Valve has received a DMCA copyright takedown notice directed at your game on Steam. A copy of the notice is set forth in full at the end of this email. Olga Yakovlenko, on behalf of GSE Game World Global, alleges that they are the copyright owner of the following games: Clear Sky Enhanced, Shadow of Chernobyl Enhanced, and Call of Pripyat Enhanced, and that your use of their game content without their authorization infringes their rights. There are two examples of environment content. These examples are provided for illustration purposes only and do not encompass all infringing content. People are remiss in not noticing that word, all infringing content. A common argument is that if you are, depending on your argument, that you don't want to show all of your cards right away, like poker. I shouldn't equate it to a card game, but it's the only thing coming to mind. You shouldn't show the absolute strongest evidence first. And that isn't coming from anything official, that's just what people are saying, and it does make sense. However, these are the screenshots in this particular instance, this DMCA, if it is to be believed. As a result of this complaint, we have temporarily removed your game from Steam as required by law. Valve follows the procedure set forth in the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. The DMCA is a United States copyright law that governs online service provider liability in case of a copyright infringement claim. When we receive a DMCA notice, Valve must take down the allegedly infringing copyright materials. Otherwise, Valve could be subject to a copyright infringement claim themselves. If you feel that it's inaccurate, Valve can reinstate your posting only upon receipt of a DMCA-compliant counter notice. Okay, so identifying the material, statement made under penalty of perjury, blah, 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 mailing address, telephone number, and that will be handled in Washington, where Valve is located if the developer is outside of the US, which they are. Now, to the actual meat and potatoes of it, content being reported. This unauthorized use specifically includes our plot, individual scenes, design, artwork, scenarios, and branding, designed to directly reference and capitalize on our copyrighted work without authorization, which is why we consider the entire podcast. Notice, they say the word podcast. Why do they use that word? But then people are saying for that it may be a translation error. Who knows, really? But it is a very interesting word choice. To be an infringing deliverable, please be advised that GSC is not granted permission to any other Platypus or Utopia, as well as any individuals associated with above-mentioned developer and publisher, for the use of our IP. Furthermore, users in the review section specifically refer to the Stalker game franchise. This is why we consider the entire game to be an infringing deliverable. An interesting part here. So, I guess maybe they're looking at this from a defamation angle. Maybe they're like, wow, this game is so much better than Stalker. Oh, this game reminds me so much of Stalker. Like, I think it's just being mentioned at all. And a huge argument here is that, oh, well, why hasn't StarCraft been looked at? Why hasn't Project Silverfish or Anomaly been looked at? Okay, well, those mods, Anomaly has been looked at, okay? The bigger mods have been forced to update and have a link to GSC's website or the Stalker Steam page, okay? They have been looked at. They know that they exist, and they also know that it would be horrible for them to legally do something about it, because it's such a big thing. You know, because there was so much of a gap between Call of Pripyat and Stalker 2. You know what I mean? That's like 10, 15 years. So it would have been like suicide, basically, to mess with it. Nevertheless, they said, hey, Anomaly, update your version by 1 point. So it went from 1.5.2 to 1.53. And they included a link on the main menu, okay? Now, that being said, this isn't the first time a false DMCA has happened, because it has happened at least once or twice before. However, I mean, Olga's been here since at least Clear Sky, I do believe. So, but then again, you know, it could just totally be falsified. That's the entire thing. You don't really know. But let's move on. Naturally, since it's a solo developer, we'll be focusing largely on Maywing, and then we might move on to some other people. Even today, November 8th, the time of this video, politics are still being talked about. Maywing is pro-neutral. They love their country. I'm assuming it's a guy. And I'm praying every day we won't be dragged in this pointless war, and that it will end ASAP. A very neutral position, which is great. Russian saying he's pro-Ukraine, West saying he's pro-Russian. Who am I? Now this here is a very important message. If you see any Nazis or something like that, just ban the person. If someone spams Z's or Zav or any Ukrainian symbols, swastikas and so on in reactions or messages, just ban them without hesitation. This is a very important thing, because way back, these actually were, they actually were being spammed, okay? The fact of the matter is, being able to write these things and I guess spam them, you could do this in the server. Here we go. Today at 3:42, is Z banned or forbidden, whatever you want to call this word. It's banned, forbidden, not allowed, whatever, because it's another language. So is Z forbidden? I went through a list here of a few words, Wagner, and guess what? Wagner. How about Zav? Only one person saying that today. But what's really interesting is, I can guarantee you there were a lot more uses of all of these things. And isn't it very interesting that all of them happen to coincide today, as if there was almost a wipe of previous instances, as well as the rules being updated to this very short list. Now, there was actually a little like web page document thing that it took you to. I didn't care to read it because, I mean, I literally just joined the server at the time, but the point was there was an actual link before this, so it might have been summarized or, I don't know, something. But the point is, they changed the rules today. Let's take a look at the apology statement. First of all, I want to acknowledge and take full responsibility for my past words, Maywing says. What I wrote was immature, thoughtless, and wrong. It does not represent who I am today or what I believe in, and I deeply regret posting it. Back in 2022 and 24, when I was 16 to 17, I made some provocative political jokes online, thinking this trolling made me look edgy. Looking back, I now realize how dumb, disgusting, and inappropriate these comments were. I sincerely apologize to everyone I have offended or disappointed. It was a mistake, and I promise it will never happen again. I do not support any form of extremism, violence, or discrimination against any group of people. I truly value and respect our players and friends from all countries and backgrounds. This situation has been incredibly difficult for me, but I'm taking it as a lesson. I'm committed to becoming a better developer, and more importantly, a better person. I also ask everyone in our community to stay kind and not spread hate towards others. I will be implementing strict moderation rules on our Discord server to ensure it remains a safe and welcoming space for everyone, and I hope the moderators will support me in this effort. As for the DMCA strike, we will handle it calmly and professionally. There is no basis for it, and I believe Valve will review the situation fairly. I will continue working on Misery and delivering everything I promised to you. You've put your faith in me and in Misery. I ask for your forgiveness for my past mistakes, and for the chance to prove that I've grown beyond them. Thank you for your understanding and support. Now, people in the r/stalker Discord or the subreddit, Jesus Christ, are saying that this is actually ChatGPT. But if we take a look at this image, it's also a cropped image. Maywing loves cropping images, apparently. But apparently this is some sort of checker. Okay, so some sort of intellectual institute thing here, whatever, okay. Obviously a word count here, 352 out of 10,000 words, and 58% here. But it says here in his next message, there are dozens of services that check if text was made by AI. The whole thing, they say AI is anything these days. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. You can, I mean, it's a whole real thing with college. You know, professors are running it on their students' papers and shit. It's like, I would not want to go to college right now. But I don't know. Honestly, considering the actual mistakes of the actual text, because there are. Let's go through this. Okay, damn, maybe there aren't mistakes in it. I thought there were. Because usually just about every message he types will have some sort of grammar mistake. Maywing doesn't typically write with this, you know, capital letters, period. He typically writes lowercase. In any case, you've also got the moderators finding links of, well, just assets that they don't recognize it as proof. So, and to be clear, I'm not 100% on this either, okay? Somebody could have easily faked it. However, the actual things like the Zalicia entrance gate, okay, the helis maybe, but definitely the songs, Girls Are Dreaming and Dirge for the Planet, those are, Girls Are Dreaming and Dirge for the Planet, okay, those are actually Stalker songs, okay? They might not be GSCs specifically. However, Fire Lake did make them for Stalker, so there would still need to be license involved. I responded to Platypus in the other video in the comment section about this. They've yet to respond back to me on it, but I mean, you would still need permission, right? And I'm sure I don't need to show you that quote again about not needing permission unless it's a parody. Now that we know Maywing has apologized for his earlier statements, let's dig through a couple and let's understand the previous game before Misery. I'm not going to be a total heartless fuck here and say, oh, well, I know he's apologized, but I don't really care about his apology. And we're just going to rip him limb from limb and go through literally everything he's ever said. No, I'm not going to do that. We're just going to take a look at some of the few more egregious things and say, oh, well, I don't know. Maybe we could remove some of these things, try to present a more corporate, commercial, like company image. And like I said, just be more, like to know more about this situation as it's unfolding to us now. To be quite clear, posting an apology might be one of the only things you might be able to do. However, posting it in the first place does take some balls. That's great. I'm glad he came to his senses and, you know, is a better man, right? We should always applaud someone for apologizing, you know, owning up to their mistakes. That's how you mature. Being a younger person, a younger developer, you just have to realize that in life, you know? But let's do this. Now, if you had any sort of inkling of information about Misery Platypus, you might have heard about Steel Ball Race. Now, I previously thought this game actually released before Misery. However, according to these guys, this isn't the case, even so far as like a week ago. So Steel Ball Race has not finished. It is not out. And I believe there is only a trailer or two about it. There might still be the Steam page about it, but Misery is the breakout game here. Now we do have Steel Ball Race, and it's the understanding of Vesting Bead, the moderator, that Misery sales will actually go on to fund Steel Ball Race. So, depending on how well Steel Ball or Misery does, you know, even considering the DMCA. I mean, that's, let's say $8.99. And we'll go back into this. Maywing posted some figures about a year ago, roughly, whenever Misery was still in, I don't know, like alpha. Whenever it was still mostly in development, right? Like much more than it is now. He said that it would be about $4.99, roughly, considering the country. Now, maybe now it's different that he has a publisher, but that's twice the price, basically, right? That's 90% more of a increase, right? So $4.99 to $8.99. And if we listen to the Misery developer, the spokesperson, whoever, that said Misery has released 220,000 copies after maybe, what, a couple weeks of being released? That's $2 million. That's $1,900,000. And, you know, there's taxes, of course. There is the publisher. You know, the publisher's going to take their cut. You know, nothing is free. They funded the game. So, but I'm sure Misery got a good, you know, Platypus, Maywing got a nice little chunk out of that, right? And I feel like therein lies the problem, because with Anomaly, you're not making money, okay? There might be some buy me a coffee, I don't know, off the books, like Patreon donations or some shit. I don't know, but there's not like a direct buy this on Steam thing, right? They're not selling the mod. Now, if you're taking your product and you're selling it, not your product, like somebody else's, like this whole DMCA thing, you see where I'm going with this? And you sell it. That's the difference. The money, I feel like, makes a lot of a difference here. Considering this, I'm not sure what game this is talking about, because I don't believe Maywing started Misery until about June or July of 2024. So this is probably about Steel Ball Race. I'm not sure. However, that's not the point. The game in this context doesn't matter. This is the point here. It's perfectly legal, and you are allowed to sell stuff that includes someone else's property, as long as it falls under parody. What do we consider a parody? A parody is an imitation of the style of a particular writer, artist, or genre with deliberate exaggeration for comic effect. So, in other words, it's meant to be funny. It's meant to be blown out of proportion. You know what I mean? So, it isn't going to be one-to-one, a humorously exaggerated imitation. Is there anything funny about Misery? Not really. It's actually kind of sad. I mean, it's fun whenever I have fun with my friends. I'm laughing and whatnot, but the game itself, like, there's not a bunch of symbols everywhere. There's not things literally in my face, like, you know what, like how you would expect a parody to be. It is a game, you know? Now, as far as the statements Maywing has said to actual people, he does say press help in main menu. It says what to do in the demo. You will see it. But then he makes fun of the users a little bit, saying, bro really can't find the help button in main menu. There was another one. He calls people losers and whatnot. But he also talks about religion. He says, well, I'm an atheist. I'm the atheist. But I don't disrespect other religions. And then he goes on to say the Bible and Quran is the same as an ancient Greek myth. Literally a minute later, he goes on to ask, how does the afterlife work? If you were Muslim, you go to heaven or hell. If you were Egyptian, then you swim on the boat in the afterworld. If you were Greek, then you ascend to Olympus. You will thank Buddha instead. 69 diseases, die in agony. But then he goes on to talk about rape and murder. Maybe back then I'll say that I'll rape everyone's pretty girl. I see. But now I have the only one I love, and she is the only one I need. And then there's just more insults. Calling people brain dead. Common sense. Stupid ass. And here we go. We're even talking about people's manhoods. Bro just doesn't have one, or it's too small to hold it. Peaceful religion. If God exists, it's fucking me. Loser. We are not the same. So if we go by this image here, September 16th is really, I think, one of the first times I've seen anything about Steel Ball Race. So if we go from January of 2024 to September, that is about 8 months. So I was just about right. He was working on Steel Ball Race at this time, so that was probably more than likely what that quote was about. However, it is still pretty damning. To be quite clear, though, on first glance, this Discord had a lot of different surveys, okay, posting the minimum requirements, even though you could definitely see the likeness, the similarities, the inspirations for, from other games, okay? He even goes so far as to post Stalker GIFs, saying that Shadow of Chernobyl was one of his favorite games, which I agree, he's got taste there. Posting some environments, saying that the game was inspired, the setting is a post-Soviet country, not Chernobyl. And interestingly enough, that the game had a few delays. It initially went from June, and I think this actually became the first playtest. There were 2 playtests. I think the first one was actually on June, this date, and I think the second one was a little bit later, maybe in July. However, they still held surveys and whatnot, and there was a couple instances where they actually had trouble finding bugs, like, oh, the FPS would drop here, where we're trying to figure out what it is, or it would lag. But I think they found those issues relatively quickly, and the game released in October. Now, if we do take Maywing at his word here, he says that he actually worked at StarCraft, but that he got fired in December 2024, which is very interesting. Apparently, on the first workday, they broke contract with him because he could have problems with power. He says that he's glad they didn't take them onto that project because he has the misery now. Maywing also says that he is a level designer and level artist himself, and that is fairly clear because if we take a look at this image here on artstation.com, it looks pretty well put together. I mean, I'm not much of a level designer myself, but it looks just fine, right? I'm not saying he couldn't have just grabbed it from somewhere, but if he did make it himself, that's pretty good. Why not? And here we go. So the official release came October 23rd, and the actual playtest was July 16th. So a little bit later than expected, but that's okay. And of course, regarding the culture, Maywing has said he has read the book. He can't make the zone the same like in the book because you can just walk and die, of course. We all know about the spider web that one guy walked into and he died of a heart attack like 16 hours later in his sleep. Understandable. It is a book. It is not a playable game. It is totally different. Even GSC understands that. However, this bit is crucial to understand that Maywing has played Stalker, he's read Roadside Picnic, and honestly, he probably has at least seen Stalker. I'm not going to say he has, maybe he hasn't. A lot of people don't like Tarkovsky because of his art house style, how slow his pans are. It's another video. But judging by these vintage signs, this part is actually very interesting. I thought that was just the USSR, but this is actually the BSSR, so I suppose the Belarusian one. But the point is that I'm sure he might just be matching the time period, post-Soviet country. However, it might be worth looking into. Nonetheless, it is still pretty interesting stuff to see how it is all put together, the inspiration for the various environments and whatnot, because you do go from those signs, you go from, just a related environment, okay, similar style, whatever, to stuff like this. Okay, we have released today, October 20, like they're relying heavily on that nostalgia, okay, for these fans. This looks like almost taken directly out of the fucking Great Swamps. It really does. Like if you looked at this and you didn't play the game, you'd be like, is this like this reminds me of that earlier game, Stalker? That kind of is that what this is? Like if you showed this to someone, that's probably what they would say, right? Because on first glance, that's what like the trees and the water. Okay, that kind of reminds me of the Anomaly splash screen, actually, but still. And then, of course, we actually have the helicopters, like the truck cemetery thing, where they are all grouped together like that, but that might just be more of a coincidence. However, as other people have said, the more little things that add up, the less of a coincidence it is. You know what I mean? So if you have one or two things, you're like, oh, this gate and I don't know, gas mask or something. Okay, fine, whatever. You have statues or something. Sure, why not? Now, if you have maybe, let's say, 10 things, that doesn't look good, okay? And not to mention actual songs. It's not just assets, okay? It is multiple different categories. And now to go back to the strike, Maywing says they found an appeal room waiting for the 10 business days for it to be reviewed. People can still play the game stays on the account, and they're still working on updates. There will still be 2 big updates at the end of the month and before the new year. Right now, they're working on cats and dogs. And please don't insult GSC. Just say that they acted unfairly. And here we go, like I've said, just like the, symbols I was talking about before, PMC Wagner. The lead mod has, is a Z supporter. Here we go, SVO, Special Military Operation. Zav, of course, this, thank God Z, Slava Z, God save Z, thank you, our SVO. Now, this is the part I really want to talk about here, the N-word, okay? To a Western person, okay, to someone who grew up in America or wherever, right, somewhere that isn't Eastern Europe, you're probably going to say the N-word is literally the worst thing in existence, but it isn't, okay? And especially in these Eastern European countries, they don't have that, I'm trying to think of the word. They don't have that consideration, because they don't have that many black people there. They don't have that history that we do. They don't have segregation like we did, okay? You know what I mean? So, of course, I know that they had Pushkin, of course, but in large part, there weren't many black Eastern Europeans, and it doesn't carry the same connotation, that's the word I was looking for, that it does in the West, okay? Circumstances because of their culture. So you can't just have a blanket statement here and say, oh, well, this is what they're saying, this is what they mean. Now, I'm not saying they're not, because these are, Z supporters, and, they have these beliefs. They may very well actually be using it in that way. However, I'm just saying that this is a different culture. They carry different beliefs. You can't believe everything you see, and you need to take everything with a grain of salt, okay? This included. So take some time. If you have an Eastern European friend of whatever country, okay? They're a Belarusian, they're Ukrainian, they're Russian, whoever, okay? I know it may be hard because of the political circumstances right now, but that doesn't mean you can't go ahead and learn about someone else's culture and get a little international. You know what I mean? And of course, here we go with this. Hello, ho-holes. And for anybody who doesn't know, ho-holes it is actually a derogatory word for Ukrainians based on their hairstyles. Apparently, a lot of them would wear a single, tuft of hair on the top of their heads. And so somehow this actually became the word ho-ho or ho-holy. I probably butchered that, but that is where that comes from. Anyway, of course, we have a Russian shield and cape here. Okay, this is obviously some crusader or something, but this is posted in, Platypus Entertainment. Okay, this is the type of shit you're seeing in the Russian messages channel. Okay, people were laughing at this. They find it funny. And there's probably a lot more to this that we'll never know, because by the time I started really looking into this, it was all scrubbed. So we might really never know. I just want to close this off by saying that I honestly do agree with the Misery devs in their last statement. Don't insult GSC. Don't insult anyone. Honestly, don't go out of your way to blow this out of proportion more than it already is. This is merely informative for the sake of informing. Okay, it is not meant to incite anyone to do anything. It's merely just, why is this happening? What is going on? It's meant to get people in the know, so we know why this DMCA is happening, if it is indeed true at this point, which is still up in the air. However, this is more to understand the background of the server, the people within it, their attitudes, their opinions, etc., to understand why it could potentially happen in the first place.